So I'll try to keep things brief and fun for you guys. I know we've all got stuff going on tonight. Maybe want to do some yoga afterwards, which I'll be helping out with as well. My name's Anthony DiClementi. A little bit about me: I'm a certified nutrition specialist, NCSF certified personal trainer. I teach yoga here at David Barton, and I've taught human performance at a number of Fortune 500 companies, and I do a lot of the back-end coaching for like online health and fitness experts. So when they have clients that say buy their programs and need more one-on-one help, they come to me and I help people like lose weight, reverse disease, stay fit and healthy for life, stuff like that. So Amy asked me to talk to you guys today about nutrition, and so I was thinking long and hard about what would be the most important thing that we could communicate here in like 15 minutes that you guys can take away. And one of the big problems that we're facing today in America is we have more and more people that are trying to eat healthy, trying to lose weight, and we have a growing obesity epidemic. We have more and more people that are becoming diabetic, insulin resistant, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. So I thought the best thing to do would be to address why this is happening, what you guys can do about it, and if you are interested in losing weight, feeling better, reducing your probability of contracting these diseases, what specific action steps you could take, and why those action steps are supported in not just evolutionary research, but scientific literature, and so that you know it's not just someone giving you hearsay or their opinion on issues. It's actually supported by a lot of the evidence that's out there. So the topic that we're going to talk about today is the single most important aspect that you can make with your dietary and lifestyle choices that's going to help you to lose that weight, to stay healthy, and to build a lifestyle that's going to set you up for success, so that it's not jumping from diet to diet, losing the weight, gaining it right back, but it's becoming a part of who you are, and it's sustainable. So I'm also going to talk about why focusing on carbohydrates and fats and calories is, in a sense, putting the cart before the horse. And we've kind of gone through this shift where 20, 30 years ago, we were obsessed with calories. And we thought that if you wanted to lose weight, you had to restrict your calories, and that was the only thing that really mattered. And then that shift kind of changed, and we started saying, no, it's not just calories, it's fat that's the problem. So then all these low-fat diets became really popular. People started cutting out fat, and people had some success, but then we started realizing that wasn't the only issue. And then now, that shift is kind of taking place where now it's carbohydrates. And carbohydrates are being demonized, and they're the macronutrients that's the problem. And everybody's trying to cut carbs and feel like that's what needs to be done if you want to lose weight. And I'm afraid that what we're doing is pretty much the same thing. We're just repeating history over and over again. And the problem is not the macronutrients. The problem, which is the topic for today's conversation, is the quality of our food that we're eating and the source of our food. And so that's really where we're going to focus today, which is that quality over quantity is really what matters. And it's not just your food selection and the choices you're making, but it is the source of your food. And if you do choose to eat animals, it's what those animals ate. If you choose to focus on plants, it's how those plants were grown. Were pesticides used in them? Were they genetically modified? And that's kind of what we're going to dig into a little bit, and we're going to cover some different aspects from an evolutionary and anthropological perspective, and also from a scientific perspective to support these claims. But before I begin, there's one really important distinction I want to make. There's no one-size-fits-all diet that's right for everybody. So like, the perfect diet for you may not be the right diet for you. And even the right diet for you right now is not going to necessarily be the right diet for you for your entire life. Because as we change, as our energy expenditure levels change, as our physical activity levels change, as our hormones change, our nutritional requirements change. So it's important to keep in mind that your quest is not for the perfect diet that's going to solve all your problems, because this is very much a personal quest and figuring out what is going to work with you given where you're at this point in time, and all those individual factors that I mentioned, like your activity levels, your genetics, your hormones, and your lifestyle, your environment. So a lot of you have probably heard of like the paleo or these caveman knockout diets that are very popular right now. And I think there's probably no single diet that's done more good for our society than these paleo and caveman diets, which is essentially the mentality behind the paleo diet is that our ancestors ate foods that existed on Earth, 10,000, 20,000 years ago, and that is what constituted the majority of their diet. And this was before the advent of agriculture, so they didn't really, there weren't a lot of grains involved in their diet, there weren't a lot of legumes involved in their diet, and there wasn't a lot of dairy involved in their diet. So from that, a lot of scientists and doctors and nutritionists have made the claim that the reason that we are so sick today is because we're including so many of these grains, so much dairy, and so many legumes and things like that in our diet, and that's the problem. And while that makes some sense on the surface, if you really dig into it, and I guess the best way to really make sense of all this is they've found that when people eat ice cream, when ice cream consumption goes up, shark attacks go up, which is interesting. So you think to yourself, okay, so does eating ice cream increase my chance of getting attacked by a shark? Maybe. But then the more you kind of step back and look at it, you think, okay, well, when do people eat more ice cream? It's typically when it's hot outside. And when it's hot outside, people go in the water more. When people are in the water more, there's more likely a chance that there's going to be shark attacks taking place. So we have these compounding factors like the weather that aren't taken into account. And if you just look at the surface, you say people eat more ice cream, shark attacks go up. And there's a lot of these compounding variables that take place with nutrition, and it leads to inaccurate assumptions and hypotheses, like the fact that eating grains, legumes, and dairy is bad for everybody. And it's not. Like I said, it's an individual thing. So, where was I here? And so I apologize for the paper. I put this all together like an hour ago, so I wanted to make sure I wasn't, I wanted to make sure you guys had a decent presentation. So the biggest things that you really want to focus on is not necessarily avoiding any certain type of food, as long as the food that you're eating is food that was here on Earth 10,000 years ago, and ideally food that's in its processed, unadulterated state. And there's one of the trainers here, there's a story I'll share with you. Her name's Vita. She came here from the Ukraine about 4 years ago. And she was in the Ukraine, even then she was really into like health and fitness. And she bought a lot of her own groceries, she would cook a lot of her own food, she ate pretty well, and she was in pretty good shape. And then 4 years ago she came to the States, and nothing really changed. Like you hear stories about people that come to the States, and they come from like Japan, and they're used to eating like traditional Japanese diets, and they come here and they're like, McDonald's, fast food, and they're like, they blow up. It wasn't like that with Vita. She came here and she pretty much continued eating the same types of food that she'd always eat in the Ukraine. She continued to grocery shop, she continued to prepare her own meals, and her food selection was identical to what she was eating overseas. But within a few months, she gained 25 pounds. And a lot of the reason for that, what we can deduce, and this isn't necessarily the case, but it's likely the case, is because of all the things that are added to our food and our food supply today, especially in America. We have chemicals like ractopamine that's in our meat, which is used to build lean muscle in cows so that so that the yield per cow increases, and there's more muscle and less fat. But this chemical ractopamine has been linked to cancer in hundreds of studies, and it's banned in like 138 countries, but it's legal in the US. And that's just one example. So when you take into account things like ractopamine, the hormones, the chemicals, the pesticides that are rampant in our food today, all of those things play a role in our ability to lose weight and our health. And that's why one of the reasons that food selection is so important. And one of the reasons that, when you hear things like where people are like, you should eat organic, you shouldn't eat organic, it doesn't matter. Organic essentially means that it's as close as you can get to the diet that our Paleolithic or caveman ancestors ate. So it's free from a lot of the things that we've added to our food to kind of mess with it. And my recommendation would be that if your circumstances allow, whether that's your budget or access to these foods, if those allow you to purchase organic foods, I would encourage you to do it, because it's not just the type of foods you buy, it's a lot of these invisible things like the chemicals, the pesticides, the hormones, the antibiotics that play a role in our ability to lose weight and stay healthy and build a lifestyle that's going to set us up for success. Okay, so covered all that. All right, so now I know a lot of you are probably thinking, like, with so much focus on fats and carbohydrates and calories, it's really hard to dismiss those things. And I'm not asking you to do so, because they do play an important role. But the reason that I'm emphasizing quality over quantity is twofold. If you look at a high-fat diet that's low in carbohydrates, which is, which it was essentially like demonized 15, 20 years ago, and a lot of people still are big advocates for avoiding all saturated fats. There's the lipid hypothesis, which is that belief that like dietary saturated fat intake leads to an increase in blood serum levels of cholesterol, which leads to an increase in your probability of getting heart disease. And that's now been proven false. And we can also look at a lot of these traditional cultures, like the Maasai tribes and the Inuits, who consume very high-fat diets, very low-carbohydrate diets, and they have almost no incidence of heart disease. And they're very lean, relatively lean. The Inuits carry some extra fat because it's adaptation to their environment, because it's freezing cold. But besides that, we have a lot of examples of these traditional cultures that are consuming very high-fat diets and very low-carbohydrate diets, and yet are very healthy. And then, oh yeah.
I was going to ask you, can certain foods cause stress?
Good. Yeah, absolutely. So let's come back to that at the end, and then I'll definitely do it, because I got room for questions, and we'll, that's actually a really interesting question. On the other end of the spectrum, we have high carbohydrate diets and low fat, high carbohydrate, low fat diets. So we can look at cultures like the Kitavans, the traditional Okinawans, the Tukisenta, where particularly the Kitavans and the Tukisenta, they get over 90% of their calories from carbohydrates. And they consume very low fats, yet they're very lean, and they also have almost no incidence of modern degenerative disease and the inflammatory conditions that we face today. So we can see there's this continuum of from high fat to high carbohydrate and everything in between. And there's plenty of examples that show cultures eating a wide variety of different types of macronutrients are healthy. And that helps to support a little bit of what we're talking about, which is that quality over quantity is really what matters, and having food that hasn't been adulterated by man. An argument could be made that yes, perhaps these cultures have genetic variabilities that make them less predisposed to the effects of a high carbohydrate diet, and I would agree that may be an element. But similarly, like, there are also epigenetic changes where if you were to suddenly switch from, like, let's say you're eating a high fat diet and then you switch to a high carbohydrate diet, that environmental shift would cause, it would elicit a response of your genes to become more effective at digesting carbohydrates and converting your chosen food source to energy. So you would perhaps start producing more amylase, like a digestive, an enzyme in your saliva that would help break down carbohydrates. So there are all these different factors involved, but in any case, quality over quantity is really what matters, and there's a lot of examples to support that. So focus on those whole unprocessed foods, and as when you can, try to eat organic. Where else was I? I'm gonna skip this part just for the essence of, in the interest of time. Where's the watch? Just want to make sure we're okay. Okay. The big problem that we're facing now is not the reason that obesity is at an all-time high, the reason that degenerative disease in America is at an all-time high. It's not the carbohydrates. It's not because we're eating too many bananas. It's not because we're eating too many sweet potatoes. It's because 70% of calories that Americans are consuming, they're coming from flour, sugar, industrial seed oils, dairy products, and alcohol. That's the problem. And it's because we're eating junk, essentially. And as we see fast food and processed food, the stuff that's coming in bags and boxes, move overseas and start to infiltrate like traditional cultures like the Okinawans. We're seeing the same shift in them. And this is the first time that like Okinawan children are not expected to outlive their parents. And it's because these fast food restaurants have now popped up all over the place. So these are the big macro shifts that are taking place that are having an impact. And it's important to make the distinction and focus our energy on what really matters as opposed to some of the things that are whispers as opposed to shouts. Yeah, so we're seeing diseases that are taking off with the introduction of white flour, industrial seed oils, processed sugars, and pretty much anything that comes in bags, boxes, tubes, cans, whatever. So the one other thing that I wanted to kind of touch on this past week, and this kind of has to do with the things that we are adding to our foods and the role in those places, so the pesticides and the chemicals and the hormones and antibiotics. This past week, my father was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And as part of the screening process, so for a long time, he was pretty resistant to even admitting that anything was wrong. And then about 6 months ago, he said, he's like, would you help me and start working with me? And I kind of assumed it was Parkinson's, but I'm not a physician, and I don't have experience working with people that have had Parkinson's to an extent to be able to make an official diagnosis. But I assumed it was, so we started doing some things to help him, and he started making improvements. But at the same time, more needed to be done. So we took him to a neurologist, and he was just this past week diagnosed. And one of the first questions that the neurologist asked was, did you grow up on a farm and were you exposed to pesticides as a child? And the reason is because there are, a lot of times, there's not, similarly, in the same way that there's not one diet that's right for everybody, there's not one thing that's bad for everybody. You hear some things that how like mercury in your mouth is terrible for you. And it can be if you have a genetic predisposition that makes it difficult for you to detoxify mercury from your body. And that's why there are some people that have had dental amalgams for decades and had no problems. And other people may be experiencing dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and some of those unwanted symptoms. Similarly, so it's this intersection of like your genetic predisposition and then an environmental trigger. When those two things collide, that's when the problems exist. So with my dad, an example, he did happen to, his family owned a farm, and he did a lot of work on there. His dad had him doing a lot with pesticides. And I don't want to digress, but the situation can very well exist that my dad had this genetic predisposition that made it difficult for him to detoxify. And then when he was exposed to environmental trigger, such as these pesticides on the farm, the two resulted in a shift that decades later manifested itself as Parkinson's. So it's important to be aware if we're consuming produce or even meats that have eaten produce that contains pesticides, and you happen to be one of those people like my father that has a genetic predisposition or a challenge detoxifying yourself, that is a risk you may be presenting yourself to, and that's why it's quality over quantity. Choose organic when you can, and listen to your body. Choose foods that help you to feel your best, and by making those intelligent choices and making those intelligent choices a part of the way you live your life, it's going to help you to look better, feel better, perform better in every area of your life. So that's all I've got for you guys today. Hopefully you found something helpful there. I apologize for occasionally referring to the notes. I know it's like, but I wanted to make sure that we kind of covered everything. And now let's open it up for questions. Yes? Yes, foods that increase stress. So I would say yes, there are. The biggest that I see with clients is not technically a food, but it's stimulants, particularly like caffeine and coffee. And there's a few. I mean, this is a topic that we could go into in a lot. We could spend a lot of time with. But one of the biggest challenges that I'm seeing with people today is gut health issues. So you're hearing about individuals that are dealing with like IBS or Crohn's colitis, and just a number of different symptoms that are all related to gut dysbiosis or leaky gut, intestinal permeability, problems that have been created either from the food we're eating, the environment we're in, and whatnot. And a lot of that, you're probably familiar with gluten. A lot of people are like, I don't even know what gluten is. I mean, for a while, I was like, gluten's bad. What's gluten now? Yeah. But a lot of people, whether it's that they're dealing with these gut issues, are sensitive to gluten. But gluten isn't the only culprit. There are a lot of foods like that mimic gluten's effect on the body, which can also exacerbate stress and cause stress. So really anything like, I don't want to get into too much detail, but essentially if you have intestinal permeability or gut issues and you consume gluten, you're irritating that problem and you're making it worse. But wheat and gluten are not the only elements that can be problematic for that. There's Cyrex Labs has a test that basically looked at all the different foods and found the ones that mimicked gluten's effect on the body, which are they call them gluten cross reactants. And some of the biggest were coffee, chocolate. I have the list at home off the top of my head. I want to say like some nuts and seeds. I'd be able to get back to you. I could probably, if we post this video online, I'll add some of those top gluten cross reactants. But the biggest one that a lot of people consume is coffee. So you're getting a double whammy with coffee, in that if you're sensitive to caffeine and stimulants, it's going to make you jittery and anxious and feeling more stressed, because coffee and stimulants themselves artificially induce the body's fight or flight response. And then on top of that, you're consuming the #1 gluten cross reactant. So if you also have gut issues going on, then you're kind of getting a double whammy with that. So I would say probably the biggest food that is not technically a food that contributes to stress would be coffee, and then some of those other gluten cross reactants, and particularly like the flours, the sugars, the industrial seed oils that really are nutritionally
So like
devoid.
pre-workouts too.
Pre-work, yeah, anything with stimulants. You're basically stressing your adrenal glands and artificially inducing your body's fight or flight response. And the same way that like if you were walking around and during Paleolithic times and the saber-toothed tiger jumped out at you and your body was like, whoa, get me out of here, and you take off. Like you're doing that every time you're slapping these stimulants over and over again on a daily basis, and it causes these situations like hypothalamic pituitary axis dysregulation, or like adrenal fatigue, as you probably heard it called, and a number of other issues that essentially make you feel like you're more stressed. Did that help a little bit?
Yeah, no wonder why my friend takes the pre-workout. He acts like a baby.
Yeah. I had a friend that had that going on too for a while. We had to take it away from him. Any other questions? Yes.
Diet soda. Why is diet soda bad? Why do people say diet soda is so bad?
Yeah, so diet soda, there's a number of things going on there. The biggest is the artificial sweeteners. And this again comes back to the issue of your gut biome. Artificial sweeteners, particularly like Splenda, NutraSweet, Equal, they've been shown to kill the good bacteria in our gut and set the stage to allow bad or pathogenic bacteria to multiply. And when that occurs, it then causes digestive issues. You have trouble breaking down your food. The 80% of your body's serotonin, like the feel-good neurotransmitter that's increased when you take Prozac, the antidepressant, is produced in the gut. So once our gut health starts to go, our mood starts to go, our ability to digest, absorb, and assimilate nutrients from our food is compromised, and it leads to a cascade of health issues that most prominently are exhibited in the form of obesity and difficulty losing weight. That answer a little bit. That's probably the biggest.
I'm
But
glad
there
you
are
asked.
others.
So which food boosts serotonin?
Which foods boost serotonin? The best way to boost serotonin is to improve your gut health, and that would be avoiding some of the problematic foods like the processed sugars, the refined flours, the industrial seed oils, and foods and consuming more foods that help to heal your gut, like whole food probiotics. So sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir from grass-fed cows, bone broth, which sounds disgusting, but is really for people that are on healing diets and have intestinal permeability and gut issues. Consuming bone broth, it's high in glycine, which helps to heal the gut lining and stuff. So consuming foods that heal your gut, avoiding foods that result in gut dysbiosis or help the bad guys multiply.
Would that also include kombucha?
Kombucha, yeah, kombucha is a good one as well. And with kombucha, you want to go more towards the original as opposed to a lot of the flavored ones, which have added sugars and sweeteners, because then you're kind of like you're taking good with the bad. But the closer you can get to original kombucha, yeah, it's a great source of whole food probiotic.
Oh, can you list some of the industrial oils you're talking about?
So industrial seed oils, canola oil, which is, you guys have all probably heard of genetically modified organisms or GMOs, which have been artificially engineered in the laboratory. The three biggest genetically modified organisms are corn, soy, and canola oil. So if those are like, if there are three foods that you absolutely want to avoid when they're not organic, it's going to be those three. And that includes all of their derivatives.
One other one's beet.
Huh?
The sugar beet.
Sugar beet. Oh, yeah. Sugar beet. So don't eat sugar beets.
Well, it's a sweetener that they use in a lot of foods that are processed, so
Yeah.
it goes along with exactly what you
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are lists, like if you looked up like most commonly genetically modified organisms, wheat is one that gets mentioned a lot. It's not technically genetically modified, but it's been hybridized a lot, and because of all the different things that we've done to manipulate wheat in our food supply, it's another good one to stay away from unless it's 100% organic.
One more thing, fructose. Do you have a rule on fructose?
Yeah, so that would depend on the context. So fructose in the context of if it's coming from whole organic fruits and you have a healthy metabolism and insulin response, I think is a good thing. It's healthy and beneficial because you're also getting the fiber and the nutrients that come with that organic fruit. A lot of fruit has been crossbred and hybridized to increase its size, increase its sugar content and sweetness, and for those reasons, it's better to avoid conventional fruit, which is higher in the sugar fructose and typically lower in nutrients, especially when compared with organic. When you do consume fruit, it's typically better to consume it alongside a complete protein that contains all the essential amino acids like different types of the healthy meat, like grass-fed beef, wild-caught fish, free-range chicken, and that will help to keep your insulin levels and blood sugar levels stable so that it's minimizing the weight gain that can occur from fructose. But besides organic fruit, I'd probably stay away from it in just about everything. Yes?
I just wanted to, I really super appreciate the focus on your talk, and also wanted to add the importance of what is going into your food in terms of what's in the soil. So not only what's not with organic food, it's not only what's not going on your food, but what kind of nutrients are in the soil. And usually when you're buying from a smaller farmer, and there's CSAs all over the city that you guys can find, they're going to be trying to balance all the nutrients so that when you're eating that food, you're getting satisfied so that you're not eating more. And I think that goes along with like the quality versus the quantity. The quantity will naturally go down when your body's feeling satisfied from having the nutrients like magnesium that soils across this country are devoid in now. So if you're needing to have magnesium to fulfill a need in your body, which we all do, you're going to want to eat more in order to get that, right? Is this something that you've heard?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great point. So going back to that, quality matters. The more you can also focus on local and seasonal, the more nutrients your food's going to contain. So essentially, the shorter amount of time that has elapsed from when your produce was picked from the earth until you are eating it, the more nutrients it's going to contain. And a lot of times, when it's local and seasonal, you're also getting more nutrients from the soil. You're not dealing as much with over farming, which over time starts to rob the soil of nutrients like magnesium. And it is in part responsible for the magnesium deficiency epidemic that a lot of people are experiencing. Like 60+% of people now are deficient in magnesium. And that can also be a big part of people feeling stress. When your magnesium levels are low, you experience muscle tightness, you may experience like twitching eyes, you're more likely to experience stress, depression. So it's all interrelated, and like that's a really good point. Any other questions? All right, cool. Well, thank you very much, guys. If you guys want more information, you're welcome to check out thehealthblueprint.com. We help with one-on-one nutrition coaching, put together customized programs so you know what are the best types of food to eat, how many of those carbohydrates, fats, calories you want to be taking in as an individual to help you lose weight, look your best, and feel your best. And if that's something you want to do, feel free to check us out in there. We've got like a contact form to reach out. You can talk from there. Thanks for coming. Cool. And then I guess we're going to do some
A
yoga.
little bit of yoga, about 20 minutes.
Yeah, you guys want to do some yoga? No.